crime, cases, and backing the blue. Now, here are your hosts, Captain Ed Mehmet and Detective Kevin Schroeder.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cop Talk. I'm Kevin Schroeder, your host. I'm here with my co-host, Captain Ed Mehmet.
Hello, WABC listeners and YouTube viewers. Today we have a very special guest. I know I say that many times. We have a special guest, but this guy is very special.
So today's guest on Cop Talk is retired NYPD Detective Keith Schiller. Keith Schiller is a Navy vet. He also was on the New York City Corrections Department, but also on the NYPD Police Department. And then from there, he became Trump's bodyguard for many, many years, bringing him right to the White House. Keith Schiller, welcome.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I do have to make a slight correction in reference to my corrections department. It was actually New York State, not New York City. But everything else you said was pretty much right on point.
It doesn't matter. It was prisoners, wasn't
it?
Yeah. They're all the same.
They're all the same. This was just a younger group of guys.
Younger version of the corrections department.
Yeah.
So, Keith, why don't you tell our audience your background, where you grew up?
Well, I came from a fairly large family, upstate New York, Ulster County, in a very small town, New Paltz, New York. And my family actually was originally from the Bronx, but my father wound up working for IBM in Poughkeepsie, and we settled in New Paltz, New York. So that's where I was born and raised. Approximately 19 years old, I enlisted in the Navy. From there, and then I wound up, did 4 years.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, 4 years, U.S. Navy, Little Creek, Virginia, stationed aboard the USS Plymouth Rock, and then and went back to Ulster County. But really got my start in New Paltz, a great little town up there. But my family are based out in New York City.
Okay. So when were you in the Navy?
1978 to 82.
And then you came on the New York State Corrections Department?
Yeah, from there I came out, and the story is, and my wife at the time became pregnant, so I said, I have to get some benefits here. So when I wound up, I was a volunteer at the New York State Division for Youth with the local parish, with the priest there, and we would go in and counsel some of the young inmates. And then I went, after going there with the priest as a volunteer, I realized, I said, I could do this for a living. I actually enjoyed working with the people there, the young guys. So I wound up, because my wife also was pregnant at the time, I said, it'd be nice to become a state employee, get that insurance package. And that's where I started. I wound up going there and working there for 8 years as a youth division aide/counselor. So, and that was in Ulster County as well.
And then you came on the New York City Police Department.
Yeah.
Okay, where'd you start out?
So my first command, believe it or not, was in Transit District. At the time, and I'm sure you guys remember, there was 3 different agencies when I got on board. It was the Housing, Transit, and the regular Police Department. Right. And by the luck of the draw, I wound up going with the Transit Department, which at first I didn't even realize the difference. I was raised upstate New York, so I didn't. I thought it was all one big job. Obviously, it wasn't. I went into the Transit Division. My first command was over at Yankee Stadium. I'm not sure if the district might have been District 11, or I forgot exactly what it was. And then I spent time there. And then I went over to Harlem. I worked at 145th Street and St. Nick. There was another transit district. But I realized transit really wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to go with the regular department. So I did a lateral transfer into regular police department, and my first command there was the 3-4 precinct.
So you worked in the 3-4 precinct?
Yeah.
And then where'd you...
in the Heights, Washington Heights.
Yeah. Where did you go from there? I mean, how many years did you do in the 3-4?
Just a few years in the 3-4. I don't know, approximately 3 to 4 years, something like that. But while I was there, I spent time in uniform, but I also got involved at the time, and I'm sure you guys remember the Street Narcotics Enforcement. It was called SNU at the
SNU,
time.
yeah, SNU. Uniform narcotics.
Yeah.
I was in SNU as
It's
well.
Command level, right?
Right.
So, and I thought it was great. You know, we were in the Heights. We're up there by the George Washington Bridge. So anything to get out of uniform, right? Nobody wanted to be in uniform, and we were very fortunate that I had a very, at that time, the 3-4 was probably one of the most active commands as far as the drug enforcement in New York City, other than Queens. But the 3-4, 3-3, 3-0 was very, very active at that time. So I got involved with the Street Narcotics Enforcement, and which was just command level drug enforcement, and it was really exciting. And I thought it was, we were doing God's work up there. One day I come in on a Friday, and they tell me, you guys are being transferred to OCCB, which right out of SNU. No interview, go right into narcotics with the Organized Crime Bureau, right? Later on, to the Organized Crime Investigative Division, OCID. But so I went right from the precinct to narcotics, and I stayed there for a few years until eventually I went to OCID, which was another federal drug task force at the time.
Right. Now, when you were in the 3-4, so you did patrol, you did SNU.
Yeah.
Then you went to narcotics, Manhattan North Narcotics, right?
Yeah, I went into narcotics, and it was good because our team worked in the 3-4 precinct, so we had.
So you knew it well.
I already had CIs up there, and we were able to hit the ground running when we did the narcotics.
Is that the Manhattan North Initiative?
Yeah, NMI.
NMI, right?
Yeah.
Right. I was on a 3-3 team.
Yeah. So we probably knew a lot of the same guys.
Yep.
My sergeant at that time was Donnie McNulty, who was in charge of SNU, who also went down. And then I just thought it was great. At the time it was a very exciting job, and being somebody that was born and raised upstate New York, it was a very every day was eventful. So I was glad.
Coming to the 3-4, even Manhattan North Initiative, you were coming there for NMI. If you were coming there from upstate, right over the bridge.
Yeah,
it was great.
Well, originally, probably one of my first commands in narcotics, they had me out in Creedmoor, out in Queens.
Queens.
Yeah, they made me. That was one of the first commands. At that time, they gave me an option. Do you want to? They started the terrorist task force, which was out in Brooklyn, and I had some people from my old command that were going out there. And they said, but I lived upstate. I said, do I get a company car? And they said, no, you don't get it. So you're saying I have to drive from upstate to Brooklyn to the first terrorist that's where they had their office. And I declined to go into that. So I actually went into OCID and then narcotics and then eventually OCID.
Oh, okay.
So I stayed in Washington Heights. Was great because I lived upstate.
Yeah.
So it was good.
Captain?
I would assume that the highlight of your career was working directly with President Trump as his bodyguard and whatever else you did.
Yeah. That's a whole interesting story. How that actually started as a side gig.
So why don't you tell our audience how did you start? How did you start to work with President Donald Trump?
So and I'm sure a lot of guys that listen to this, and you both know a lot of the guys, whether it's NYPD or FDNY, they have side jobs. So it just so happened that I brought most, if not all, my cases to the Manhattan DA's office. And one day I'm down in the DA's office, and I walk in, and there's an ADA. I won't say his name now, but there was a young lady there that he was interviewing, and it turns out it was Mr. Trump's second wife, Marla Maples, who was being interviewed, not because she was in trouble, because they were prosecuting one of their employees. And I really can't go into why they were prosecuting that person. But I had met Mrs. Maples at that time there. And I went over and introduced myself because I knew the ADA who was working with her. So being the cocky detective that I was, I figured I'd go over and say hi. And I recognized her immediately. And while I'm talking to her, a gentleman comes down the hallway, and he sits right next to her. and I thought it was very blatant, very odd. I said, who is this guy? And the ADA tells me, oh, that's her bodyguard. So at the time, I was in much better shape, a little larger than I am now. So I said to myself, if he's a bodyguard, I'm surely I could be a bodyguard as well. So that evolved into me talking to the ADA and said, do you know Mr. Trump? And he said, of course we do. We're handling this for him. So I said, well, let him know you got a good guy. Could you give me a recommendation? And long story, he speaks to Mr. Trump. I get called in for an interview. And as a side gig, you know, I was on the job as a detective. So that side gig turned into 25 hours approximately a week. And they gave me a deal. They said, Keith, if you come on board, we'll give you 1 month to work with at the time, Mr. Trump and his family, doing a security detail. They said, but after 1 month, if you guys don't hit it off, so they wanted to see basically if I would mesh with him. And if you guys don't mesh, then unfortunately, you know, you're out the door. So it's basically a 1 month trial period.
With the Trump organization.
Yeah, with the Trump organization and Mr. Trump. Now, I had met him during the interview process. It was a fairly lengthy process. And I met one or two other executives prior. But I ultimately met him, and then they brought me on board. So that 1 month actually turned into about 17, 18 years of working directly with him. So it evolved from a part-time gig for 5 years, and then in 2004, when I retired from the PD, I went with them full-time.
So who interviewed you, first of all, for the job with Trump Organization?
I don't recall exactly who the first interview was, but the second person and the most important person was Mr. Trump. And it was actually a very brief, because I did have like a recommendation from the ADA, but also internally there was people that knew who I was.
Still a formality. So, I mean, what type of questions did he ask, if you don't? Can you tell us, our audience, some of the questions he may have asked?
Well, at the time, they wanted to know if I had any background in protection work. And I said, yeah, I had taken, there was, the PD had actually offered a protection detail class. Right. As you probably are aware, the Secret Service comes in and they do like
dignitary protection.
Yeah, dignitary protection. Right. I had that, but I also had, you know, on several details, I was sort of in position where I had done protection work for other dignitaries, but while I was on the job. So I had a little basic knowledge of exactly what was going on. And that was basically it. But I think the most important was the recommendation from the ADA that I knew very well, highly recommended me to the Trump Organization. So I think just on that alone, or that was a big part of it, why they actually brought me on board. So
tell our listeners, you know, what was it day-to-day working for
well, at that
Donald
time,
Trump.
in the beginning of, you know, working at the task force, you know, I would oftentimes leave like 5, 6 o'clock, and then I would go directly to Trump Tower. And at that point, Mr. Trump at that time that would be the end of his workday, and he would either go to dinner and then maybe go to a ball game later at night. So my days were pretty jam-packed. It was work at the police department, leave, go directly to Trump Tower probably 5 days a week. Working at that time, we had a fairly small detail. There was like 4 or 5 other active duty cops, one other guy that was who was in charge. He was never in law enforcement, but so there was a detail like 4 to 5 different guys that would, you know, whack it up and go out with him. So it's really, at that time, and even today, there's no such thing as an 8-hour workday with Mr. Trump. He's probably the most hardest working guy I've ever met.
Sure.
I mean, 12, 16-hour work days. And when I mean work, you work in the office and then you go out and they go to dinner and then or go out to an event. There was always work related. So there was many times, you know, he would be out another 8 hours after his workday. So it was pretty grueling in the beginning.
So
at that time,
when you retired from the police department, you started doing, I guess, a lot more traveling.
Yeah.
With
So
President Trump.
at the time, when I did put in my papers, I remember clearly I retired. So I was doing both jobs at that time, and sometimes even a third job to make ends meet, like most cops and firemen do. They have extra income. So I retired. I put in my papers. My last day was on a Friday, and it was a 3-day weekend. I took all 3 days off, and then I went back to Trump. I reported full-time at Trump Organization. And then that was on a Tuesday morning. On a Thursday, we left for, I believe, a 10-day trip, and I didn't stop traveling for years after that. So it became an extremely busy, and there was no such thing as having another job.
Right.
Because the days there was, I remember clearly the first week when I went into his office, I showed up like, say, 7 a.m., meet him in the office, and we're in his office, and I was not used to being confined into an office setting. And I remember looking out at Central Park for 8 hours, 10 hours. We were up there. If he would leave, I would go with him depending on where he would go. I would escort him, or the driver and I would go, whether it's lunch, whether it's a meeting, but we'd come back into the office. But those days in the office were excruciating as far as the hours. Like I said, nobody works like this, like Mr. Trump. 12 hours was probably the minimum that he would be in his office during the day, and then go home and then go out again for another extended, whether it's a concert, a ball game. We would go to a concert at Madison Square Garden, leave the garden, go out to LaGuardia, get on a plane and fly overseas. I mean, it was a common occurrence. So it turned out to be a long, it's a good way to lose weight, too.
I remember, I remember one story, I'm sure you remember too, is with you. 10 years ago, 40th anniversary for SNL. I was with Keith Richards, and you were with Mr. Trump, President Trump. And I was with Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones, and we were at the event. Yeah. And there was so many celebrities, and there was probably 100 other bodyguards. Right. But the only two bodyguards that were allowed to be on the same floor of the studio was you and I.
Right. You have a better memory than I, but you're 100% right. That was a great evening. Yeah. But those nights for Mr. Trump were very, very common. I mean, like you said, SNL or Madison Square Garden. And you got to remember, much like Keith Richards, Mr. Trump always drew a crowd. And unlike today, it's a different. The security concerns are different. Back then, it was really more of a concern of people that want to touch him, people want a photo, somebody just want to be next to him, crowd him. So it was like Elvis is in the building, right? I mean, you can't get a guy that has more fans and people that love him. There's been places they follow him around, and this is long before politics. I mean, walking down Fifth Avenue was an adventure in itself because of the people that would stop him. I mean, he was probably the most recognized person on earth, even before he got into politics.
Yeah.
This National Foster Care Month, Marine Toys for Tots is providing hope to children who need it most. Staff Sergeant James Caldwell, who grew up in foster care himself, shares that while handing out gifts at a Toys for Tots distribution event, a little girl looked up at him, reached into her bag, pulled out a stuffed animal and said, "Someone needs to make sure you get a toy too." That simple gesture embodies the heart of Marine Toys for Tots, ensuring every child, including those in foster care, experiences the kindness that can transform their future. Visit toysfortots.org today.
Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But D.C. politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
He's been portrayed by the news media many times in a derogatory way. He's been called a Nazi, fascist, and all kinds of things. Can you tell, since you were so close with him, tell us about his real personality, who he really is?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because some of that was recently, and most of it, or a lot of it's happened in the past. And I always say, refer people to his rallies. And his rallies, and even the most recent in Madison Square Garden, they equated that to some type of Nazi gathring. But I say, look in the crowd. You have people from every nationality, every color in the world, all walks of life, whether it's Jewish, American, black, Indian. It's actually a mockery to say that this would be like a rally or anybody related to Hitler, that this guy there's not one iota of racism, prejudice in this guy's body. And I can say that with authority because I've seen him for 18 to 20 years, even after I left the White House. The people that are around him are from all nationalities. He's probably got some of his most long-time employees, I'm talking 40 plus years, are not all American. They're from all walks of life, all different nationalities, all colors. And they will all stand up. The people that are with him the longest are a mixed bag from different walks of life and nationalities. So to say that is actually an insult. And the people that do say that do not know that man. They don't have any clue. Yeah, does it make good print? Is it great for people that dislike him? But the people that really know him, this is the furthest from the truth. He has people that love him for years and years and years, not just since the campaign. I've seen it out on the campaign trail, as Kevin has seen it when Black Tie was involved, his company. We would get off the plane. We would land in a small town, big city. We would land at the airport. We would get in the motorcade. The motorcade for say was 15 miles would go to the venue. During that entire trip, both sides of the street, there's people with American flags on their tractors in the field, in the cornfields. They were out there screaming, and they loved this man. And I don't know why he made that connection, but he has made a connection with people in this country like no other president. So to even insinuate that he was a racist or a person that thought like that is actually an insult to all those people that are out there every day in the rain, in the snow, waiting for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Keith said, we've seen it firsthand.
We've seen it, and
unbelievable. The crowds and everyone. It was like.
Yeah,
it was amazing, the reception in all different states, cities, towns. Yeah. It was great. It was awesome. Never seen it like that before. Captain?
I think one of the most significant things he's done to show what kind of guy he was, he pardoned Ron Blagojevich.
Right, Ron, yeah.
Who was in prison.
Right.
He was the governor of Illinois.
Yeah.
And a Democrat, no less.
Right.
And so politically, they were far apart.
Right.
And recently I heard Blagojevich on the radio, and he was so grateful to Trump.
Right.
Because he said that his own party, his own people just left him there to rot. Trump, who he didn't really know, felt for him and just gave him a pardon when he was president.
Right.
And so now I guess he's a great supporter.
Well, I tell you, and I had mentioned this earlier, that politics is a very, very...
dirty game.
Dirty game. It's a grimy business. It's ruthless, and like Blagojevich had said, his own party turned his back on him. That is such a common thing. You know, I spent time in Washington D.C. and I should probably not say it, but I will. There's a lack of integrity with people there. Because you could be with them at the water tank in the morning discussing something. At 1 p.m., they leak it out to the press. It was a very, very common occurrence. People who you thought were colleagues on your same team, they're not on your same team. They're leaking negative stories, anything they can to hurt you. And at that time, the President Trump, they were like undercover haters that didn't want Trump to succeed, but they spent their day and their time there doing anything they could covertly to hurt him and his administration.
Sounds like police headquarters. That's what they call the puzzle palace.
Yeah.
So, Keith, let's rewind. So, why don't you now take us from when you were with the Trump organization,
Right.
personal bodyguard and
Right.
director of security for Donald
Right.
Trump. Take us to the road to the White House.
Okay. So, so in 2004, when I retired and I went on board full time, there was we spent a lot of time developing properties and traveling the world, actually the U.S. and overseas. And at that time, he acquired many golf courses and properties. And I'm gonna, and again, the exact year, maybe 2012 approximately. Somebody, or 13, somebody said, why don't, they were trying to entice him to run for president. So they said, why don't you come up to Portsmouth, New Hampshire? And there's a Republican Party. They want to do a fundraiser for you and like introduce you to the crowd there, the people. And again, I don't recall the exact year, but it was well before 15 and 16. But so he thought it was an interesting idea, so we went up there to New Hampshire. And going back to the story where people were enamored, people followed him around like the Pied Piper in this community. Great people, and we saw it then. The reception that he got from people up there, great people. You could see that there was something there in Mr. Trump, not only just because of the fame of The Apprentice, but as a person, he just naturally connected. So that was the beginning of the idea, the seed was planted that he may get involved. And then fast forward a few years, I'm going to say in 2015, Mr. Trump and I went to an event that was it was a rally. It was actually the first rally that he ever attended, and we walked into this venue. I'm not sure the exact town, and it was 400 to 500 people there, and we were just in awe. I said, there's just me. I said, I'm good, but I'm not that good. I said, we're going to need some help in the security department, Mr. Trump. And from that point on, the very first rally that he ever attended, the attendance just grew to the thousands. So we wound up bringing on different companies, as you know, Black Tie and other retired agents that were working for us. So it evolved up until 25,000 people. This is before the Secret Service got on board. So the campaign and rallies they snowballed. And it was so obvious of his popularity and the people, how they felt about him. You can't imagine how it is unless you experience it. So, just imagine going into the garden, Madison Square Garden here, at a sold-out concert. That's a Trump rally.
Yeah.
And you've seen it,
Of course.
right? So you see the way people admire him, and also they respect him. One thing, and I'm sure you may remember, and I thought was always great, oftentimes he would bring the local police department, whoever the guys that had the detail, up on stage. Now, this was something that I don't even think you see it today, but this was something that the guys always loved. All the local law enforcement, the troopers, they would bring them up on stage, and Trump would tell the crowd, now these guys are always here to protect you. And he would actually give them, what's the word, like praise, right, for the community. And they would get a standing ovation.
True.
And that was from his heart. See, people don't understand. That's why I've said it before. He is the man of the people.
Yeah.
And so the guys would leave off stage. They couldn't believe it. But that's the type of guy he always was. These guys were unsung heroes. And not only them, the firemen, of course, they would get recognized. So this is how he connects with people. And he's always been able to do that. And that's why people would follow him into battle, every day, because of the way he connects. He's able to connect with people. Unlike a lot of politicians, they just don't have what he has.
No, it's very true what you're saying.
Yeah.
Now, Keith, so 2016, campaign's rocking and rolling. The convention out in Cleveland was
Right.
July of 2016.
Right.
And then now the road to the White House, and in November, of course,
Right.
he wins, okay, and
Yeah.
becomes the president of the United States.
Right.
And in 2017, when he's at the inauguration, he's sworn
Right.
in, you go to the White House with him.
Yeah, it was very surreal. You know, most people don't understand that unless you're a career politician and people around you are involved with politics, which most of the people were not. So it's like we equate it to the first day of school. Like you walk in there, where's my classroom? That's basically what happened in the White House.
If I remember correctly, your first day at the White House, I drove it to the White House.
I think you
I dropped
did.
you off at the White House.
Yeah, you
right?
dropped me off at the front gate.
Right.
So, so we really didn't have people around us to really guide, you know, that had the experience. There may have been one or two, and it turns out they were not on our team anyway, so they probably didn't have any intentions of helping him succeed. But it was a very surreal to be in the Oval Office, you know, being from a small town in upstate New York, and then winding up in the Oval Office with the president was surreal.
Sure.
But it was a very, I won't say difficult, but it was a learning experience that 9 out of 10 of us had to learn, including him.
Right.
Because you really don't have that guidance. You know, the former administration doesn't do much to make things easy for you. You know, they may leave a note here or there, but when you walk in there, you know, it's really it's a learning experience. But I think now this is the good thing about him being in there a second time. He's surrounded by a great group of people. They have tons of experience in politics.
Different.
And it's a whole different atmosphere. Right. He's much more prepared than he was for the first time. He really didn't know what to expect. So as you probably seen, a lot of his nominees that are there now, or he's trying to get nominated, are they're prepared for what is to come. So it's going to be much smoother transition this time
sure.
around.
I have a good story, and I want to thank you for this. My family went to the White House, and my son Daniel, at the time 11, 12 years old, you brought him into the Oval Office, and I believe the president was having a meeting, and he acknowledged you and Daniel, my son Daniel, and he said to Daniel, you know, how am I doing? And he said, you're doing great. And he says, okay. He says, I like your hair. You know, Danny's got, you know, thick blonde hair.
And he had the red tie, I think,
yes,
too.
Yes. Yeah. So it was fantastic, and he'll never forget. Yeah. So I thank you for that, and my son Daniel and my family thanks you for that as well. Yeah. That was some experience.
You know, that goes back to Kevin, that he was accessible. You know, sometimes maybe too much, but there were people that were from all walks of life that had the same opportunity you had, that were able to go in there. They never thought they would have that opportunity. And not only accessible, but approachable, right? Like you were there with your son. He had no meeting on the schedule. He was just standing at the door looking very cute and handsome with the Trump suit, Trump tie, hair. Yeah. And he said, bring him in. That's the type of guy he was. Yeah. I mean, that was sincere.
Yeah, he is. He is like that. Yeah.
So right. He is like that. So that just goes back to why people feel the way they do about him. Right. Getting into the White House was an experience that most people don't get an opportunity like to work, to ever be a part of an administration. But it's a once in a lifetime thing that I will always say, that I'll always cherish, that I had that opportunity to go there and work. Washington was not necessarily the most pleasant place if you were in the Trump administration, because as you know, you become a target, whether it's through the media or your political opposition. They made sure you're uncomfortable, and people that work for Mr. Trump in his orbit, they let it be known that we weren't really welcome, that we weren't part of the swamp. Yep. So it was not, in that regard, it was not great. It should have been a much better experience while I was there, but it's a tough place. Washington is a tough place to work.
I know.
What was your title when you were in the White House, and what did you actually do?
So I was a deputy assistant to the president was my title, but my day-to-day job was director of Oval Office operations. And my office was right outside the Oval, along with two secretaries, and then my office. And in a nutshell, it was really to regulate the people that were allowed to go in and go into that Oval Office. So I was like the last stand before going in. And oftentimes we would have a schedule for the day, as you can imagine, with the secretaries, and people are scheduled to show up at a certain time and really make sure the right people get in, and they don't. Many times people would like to bring in assistants or people that really weren't scheduled, and it was my job to make sure no one got in there that didn't belong in there.
What about the Secret Service? What was your relationship with them?
I tell you, I can't say enough good things about the service when I was there at that time. And now things are, we can discuss later, are different. But at the time, my relationship was really, I was no longer security. They were the ones that handled his security, which was a whole new experience for him. But I had a very, very good relationship with the guys, the detail. We got along exceptionally well. They were always respectful. They always respected my position with him. Oftentimes they would there was questions that they needed to ask him, and normally the detail leader interacts with him. And so if there was something that they had to ask, they would either ask me to speak to the president or the detail leader. But it was really more of a liaison job. But I have nothing but positive to say about them. At that time, they were probably they were the best in the world at that time as far as dignitary protection.
Segueing into that, what's your opinion of the two assassinations attempt where the Secret Service took a bad hit?
Yeah, they actually took a very bad hit. Again, at that time, when I was working with them, I like to say they did have the A-team, the best of the best, the most experienced people were on his detail. I'm not sure if you know that there's only so many Secret Service agents to go around. There's maybe 4,000 or 5,000. I'm not sure the number, but a big part of that does other than dignitary protection. There's money laundering, there's human trafficking. So it's believe it or not, it's a very small number of agents that actually do protection for the first family and the dignitaries, whether it's their siblings and the children. So at that time, they were the best in the world. The first assassination attempt, I'm fairly confident to say that I don't believe it was the A-team working that day. I know for a fact that there was a detail for the president, for Jill Biden that day, and also for the vice president. So they were probably spread very thin, the Secret Service. As far as their assets that day, probably not what they wanted, and they didn't get what they asked for. But as far as the guy on the roof, there is no way getting around it. They dropped the ball that day. Cut and dry. Whoever decided to keep that thing open, and again, I'm not gonna sit here and bash them, but they know it. The world knows it. They dropped the ball that day, and by the grace of God, the kid was he was just a 20-year-old kid, and by the grace of God, he just nicked the president. Anyone else that was probably capable to shoot, it probably would have turned out worse. But it was a bad day for the Secret Service.
Keith, just to rewind, when you went to the White House, like in the beginning stages when, President Trump won he was a nominee and he was going to be the president.
Yeah.
And he won the election. When Secret Service was with him, and now they had to deal with you because now you're the director of security,
right.
And you're his bodyguard, and you go everywhere he goes. Was any conflicts there, or if they were all treated, everything was well?
No, there was absolutely no conflicts. To be honest with you, there was a discussion when they came on board, and I can tell you how they came on board. You have to get authorization from the current president, so you have to request the Secret Service during the campaign, and it's dictated by whether or not whoever the president is at the time signs off on it. So at the time there was, during these presidential debates, Mr. Trump would get probably upwards of 100 death threats an hour. It was tremendous.
An hour?
Yeah, per hour during these debates. So the request was valid when it was time to ask for them. Things were had heated up. It was obvious that he was a front runner, and there was indications that I really won't get into, that there's legitimate threats. So the need for the Secret Service was definitely warranted. And when they came on board, I was actually very pleased, because they, like I said, they are the best at what they do. Again, at that time, so it was. They were very welcomed by us to come on board. And like I said, no stress, no issues. They knew who I was. They introduced themselves. We had an understanding. I'm not going anywhere. I've been with him at that time, 17 years or whatever at that time. I'm no threat to him. Right. So they understood that it was a little different, that I was with him going everywhere. So they respected that, and I respected them as well.
That's good. That's good.
Total professionals, by the way.
Right. And then you went to you were director of security for the RNC, Republican National Committee.
Right.
Correct?
Right. I had it was a security consulting gig for the RNC. So I spent about 3 years consulting for the RNC, and then eventually, when he didn't win, that came to a very quick end. That contract. So, but the great people at the RNC, good people there. Always respectful, and it was a great opportunity to work with those people. But again, that came to an end right after he lost the election. So that was that. So really, it carried right into 2020, actually. So I left at the end of 2017, the administration, and I stayed with the RNC till
right till 2020. Right.
Yeah.
Now, it's I'm sorry, Cap.
Getting back to the second assassination attempt,
right,
at Mar-a-Lago.
Yes.
Again, do you think the Secret Service dropped the ball?
Well, again, I wouldn't say as blatantly as the first attempt. There's no getting around that. There was
very obvious.
Very obvious. There's anybody with any background at all would know that roof should have been covered. The second attempt, I do have to give them credit that they did see this guy out there sticking his muzzle of his rifle or out the fence, and they did catch it. But again, some people will say, well, how come they didn't do the perimeter of the golf course prior to him going out there? Again, Monday morning quarterbacks. They caught it by the grace of God. Another one I think they got very lucky on. That this guy was foolish enough to expose his weapon while the Secret Service was out there. Again, another amateur who got very close, and it could have ended up terribly. I think they've changed, the Secret Service has changed or altered how they do the golf. And I know for a fact they stopped letting him golf for a long time afterwards until they buttoned everything up. But I think now they probably think that they should have probably secured the entire golf course or at least walked the perimeter. At that time, they didn't do it. Allegedly, that guy was in the woods for 12 hours.
Right.
Yeah. So why he wasn't found earlier is beyond me. But again, I think they got very lucky.
Maybe a helicopter would have spotted him.
Well, they talk about drones and everything, and dogs. Now I think there's what it is, and people don't understand at the time, especially the first attempt. Mr. Trump, not the most popular candidate with the Biden administration, and I'm not saying they did anything intentional, but they have options, they have assets that are available, and again, I'm just talking. Maybe they didn't give him as many assets as he should have had, right? Other people had protection, more assets. When I say assets, things to protect him. I don't think that he had everything that was available. And I think it was done because of he was just a presidential candidate. Even though he was a former candidate, president, he should have had many more. But again, I'm not going to Monday morning quarterback these guys. But I just, it's kind of odd how a former president doesn't have a much more beefed up detail, especially a candidate like President Trump. I'm sure now he does, right after these 2 attempts. You know, I'm sure that things have changed, especially now he's president-elect.
Well, during the interim between presidency, he had Secret Service, right? All ex-former presidents have Secret Service.
Yes.
Until they die.
Yeah. He had
that, right?
Yeah, he did have that. Yeah, it's never. But again, you got to remember, it's all a numbers game. You know, do they how big their detail is? What type of assets do they have? A SWAT, you know, a team. They call it something else in the Secret Service. Do they have a maritime? Do they have boats? Do they have drones? You know, there's so many different assets that are available. But if you're a former president, again, I say President Trump was not a favorite of the Biden administration, so I don't think that he had everything he should have had, right. But because he wasn't the most popular. But I think all that has changed now because he's the president-elect, and they don't want anything to happen to him.
And experience, too, just like with the NYPD and law enforcement throughout the country. You know, the experience is retiring.
Yeah.
So you have, a new generation now and manpower shortages, and so that all comes into play as well.
Right.
But absolutely, you know, we agree with you with that.
Right.
So let me ask you, going back to the White House?
I was just going to ask the same question.
Oh, yeah, okay. You can ask it now.
I have no intention of going back to the White House. Like I said, it was. I would imagine this time around they'll have a warmer reception. I believe, but the first time around, after seeing what I saw, it's just a very, very not a pleasant place to work. Because, and I'll tell you why. Is at that time. Now it's different, but at that time there were many people that were there that were on his team that were not in it for him to succeed. There were many people that were there they were hoping or doing what they could to make him fail. And eventually most of them or a lot of them got exposed. But I think that's all been remedied now. Like I said, the people around him are very loyal now. They're very smart. They're experienced. But the first time was not like that at all. So.
Yeah. Choice Hotels get you more for your money so you can maximize any road trip. Let's get real close to hear the maximum sizzle of Comfort Inn's free hot breakfast. Maximized. Check into more. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
Oh, that's for sure. I remember we had many conversations about this back then. Yeah. And I was like, really? You're like, yeah.
Yeah, it's really not complicated. You got to remember that I think at the time there was 17 candidates, right, when Trump was winning. If you remember the stage of all these people that were from Ted Cruz and Kennedy. I'm sorry, Bush. Jeb Bush, right. And there's the woman that was there. There was like 17 candidates. Yeah. So what happens is, as they failed, all their staff in those campaigns folded. And what happens to those campaigns and all those people? They all had one thing in common: they hated Trump. So what happens? Most or many of them were employed by the RNC.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they were employed because they were professional, like campaign people. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you realize, but there's these people. A candidate drops out, that campaign crew goes to the next campaign crew, and that's what happened. And many of them got absorbed by the RNC. And as you know, the RNC had many positions in the White House and the administration. So what do you have now? You're flooded by a large group of people that have one thing in common: not to see him succeed. And that was a big problem at the time.
But you're right, you could tell the difference today versus 2016, 17.
Yeah.
Absolutely, big difference.
Yeah.
And he's got the right people now in place, and
Yeah.
he's got the right the right people to do the right job.
Right.
So let me ask you, Keith, any book offers, movie deals? What's going on?
Yeah, I don't know about a movie deal, but this over the years there's been many opportunities to people approach me to write a book. But unfortunately for them, the book that they want me to write, I will never write. And they want it, as you can imagine, the negative stories or the salacious stories are big sellers.
Right.
And I made a commitment to Mr. Trump and his family many years ago. There's no money that they could offer me to write a book like that for them. So I've turned down several opportunities to write a book. They don't want to hear the positive stuff. I mean, people write good books. They don't sell as much, about his charity and how of a family person he is and how his children love him, and a lot of stories about his compassion to veterans. But they don't want that. They want me to give them some dirt, first of all, there's no dirt to give. But if I was so inclined, I wouldn't do it. It's just not in my nature to do that.
Well, that's called loyalty.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and I think that goes a long way.
And good cop stories don't sell papers, but bad cop stories do.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just
just
sad
the
but
nature.
true, absolutely.
There was a young man that I worked with in administration, and they wrote this glowing story about. He was a very nice guy, young man, only good intentions. I said, just be careful. I want to give you some advice. After the good stories come the bad stories, because now what's going to happen is they always go and they want to dig up when he didn't hand in his book at the library when he's 8 years old. It's just a common thing. You get a good story, they're going to write a bad one 2 weeks later. That's just the nature of the game.
So Keith, tell our listeners, what are you doing today? What is Keith Schiller doing today?
I've been very fortunate. I work with a good friend of mine. He actually worked for the Trump administration. I'm sorry, the Trump organization is an attorney named George Soriel. And recently we just formed a government relations firm, lobbying firm called Javelin Advisors, LLC. So George and I, we because of our relationships with the prior administration and the people that I have come in contact with over the years, and George with his relationships, we formed this firm, and we're actually going to be based out of Washington D.C. and it's really government relations, and so right now we're in the process of putting this together. We've been very fortunate. We've been contacted by several different entities with people that need to navigate the Washington D.C. and the people and the powers that be up there. So George and I are focusing on that. He's a very well known. He's an author. He wrote a book on Mr. Trump. And highly respected in his field, highly respected by the family and Mr. Trump as well. So our two relationships, I think, together is going to be a very good team, and we're out there now. Actually, our website is javelinadvisorsllc.com. So you might want to put that out there.
Yes, we will put that up on our website. And just say it one more time.
It's javelinadvisorsllc.com.
Okay.
And so we think that we could bring a lot of good there. And again, as you can imagine, we have still many relationships that are from in Washington and beyond. So it's we're looking forward to it. I'm actually, I don't think I'm going to slow down anytime soon. The last few years have been fairly uneventful, but let's see what happens. I'm looking forward to the president coming in January 20th, 2025, and the country is excited, as you can see. I mean, they're revigorated, and there's great things in the future. Mr. Trump is going to go down in history as probably one of the most well-liked, capable presidents ever to live in that White House.
I like that. I agree.
Yeah.
You told us a story before we went on air about how you were sitting in the Oval Office when Putin was there.
Well, that was at another venue that was overseas. That was at one of the summits, and I actually sat with other world leaders that were there, and I had said to you, I had to pinch myself a little bit. I said, here we are. I'm a guy just from a small town in upstate New York, and here we are overseas at a summit with the likes of I guess he's President Putin and other world leaders with their translators, and I just said, this is something that I just could never imagine growing up, especially being on NYPD, and then living in upstate, and also later on in New York, to be in the same room as these people. I just thought it was very, very, to me, most people would have to pinch themselves and say, this is something else.
Yeah, small-time boy makes it the big time.
Yeah, makes it in the big time.
But I'm sure some of these, prestigious people, they wanted to hear you. They were interested in your stories from NYPD.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Sometimes tell us a story, Keith.
I do have to say, and this is no exaggeration, I've done a lot of traveling over the years with Mr. Trump and even afterwards. And it's no exaggeration, when they hear that I'm a retired NYPD detective, you always get, guys that come up and, they realize, and it's the God's honest truth, if you're a law enforcement in New York City and a detective is just so renowned worldwide, and that's the truth, because they understand they have an idea what it's like to be in New York City. So I always felt very proud, and I mean from South America to Europe to the Middle East. I mean we spent time in, and they always bring up, oh, you're a New York City detective. It is something to be proud of, and I hope that guys that are on the job now, they realize that it's really going to be a big advantage to them, or something to be proud of when they leave this New York, leave the city. Sure. For me, it was probably the best time of my life.
Yeah. I mean, Captain, although he was a captain, a boss, he was also a detective, believe it or not, I think second grade, right, Cap?
Yeah, second grade.
Right.
And I
me
think,
too. I was a second grade,
And I think he'll agree with this, is the detective shield of the NYPD is the most popular shield, police shield in the world.
Yeah.
Recognizable, recognized all over the world.
Yeah.
There's books, there's movies, but the NYPD detective is a very prestigious position.
And I've seen it because I've been in little cafes over in Italy, sitting there with my wife, and somebody comes over and it goes, "Aren't you that detective that works for people?" Yeah. It's just such a, and again, I say that not just because I was one, but I'm just I feel very proud and honored that I have that on my resume, and I was able to achieve that. And working here, they always said 1 year in New York City as a law enforcement is 10, 12 years anywhere else in the country, because the volume of work that the guys, not the white shield detectives and the bosses, the volume of work that you handle in 8-10 hours a day, these people don't, many agencies, and it's not, just don't see that type of work. They don't see that volume, and they don't see the variety of work in a daily shift. I mean, it's just amazing.
Right, and through your career, I'm sure your career, I know my career, and I'm sure the captain's career, we've met people through all over the world. Yeah. I mean, just think of how you went to the White House, right? You're at the DA's office, and the rest is history. Yeah. I mean, that's how things go. I mean, even even myself and my security business, we're here today because of people I've met, along the way.
Right.
And the captain as well,
Yeah.
Plus the work we did and the knowledge.
Right.
I think any retired cop that really spent a good time out in the field, and really working hard, can handle any kind of job.
Yeah, and you know what it is? You also learn how to deal with people. And like I said earlier, I did 8 years. I was working in a state youth correctional facility, and then you come to New York City, and you really learn because of your day-to-day interactions with people on how to talk to people, how to respond to people. You become, 1 minute you're a psychologist, the next minute you're something, because you just have to learn to adapt and to deal with people. and it's not a job that everybody is really built for. It's either in you or not. And if you excel, it's because you have that capability to work with people. And it's not always bad. It's many times it's a good interaction. And unfortunately, those are not the ones that get the press, right? There was a time up in the 3-4 where there was some guy dangling his baby off a balcony. And
yeah, it's not easy.
We were able to, get the baby and take the baby back, but the squalor and the filth, people don't understand. You're able to help and save and do that.
Yes,
Yep. It's true, Keith.
Special
Very
thing.
true.
Before we
Yeah.
close, I'd like to make one comment. You
Yeah.
talked about writing a book before. My cousin, David Mamet, is the world's famous playwright,
Right.
and he's also an author. And when I was going to retire, I said to him, he said to me, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I don't know." So he says, "Why don't you write a book?" I said, "Oh, that's a good idea." He says, "But it has to be salacious."
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
what you said. Because that's what people want to
That's what
to
they
read.
want to hear, yeah.
I said, "Really?" He says, "Yeah, you got to make it salacious because that's his style."
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I never got around to writing the book.
Yeah, you don't want to write it. Some people enjoy writing those type of things, and to them it's a big achievement, but for me, like I said, it's just something that I'm not built like that. I would rather be known as the guy that takes things to my grave. And again, there's not, people think there's so much stuff out there that would be great, salacious. It's really not. A lot of it's like a myth. They have these ideas that of this craziness, and it's really not. But people, if they want to believe what they want to believe, unfortunately, a lot of it's perpetuated by the media.
Right.
And they think this, that they have this idea, but they have no idea. I have an idea because I spent 18 to 24 hours a day with this man for 18 years. I know what kind of person he is, and I can say from the bottom of my heart, he's a good person. And there's many more people out there that are much more salacious or bad people, and I've met them all, good and bad people. He's not one of those. He's a good man and a good family man.
Keith, we appreciate you being here today because I know you've been offered a lot of money to be on a lot of different TV shows and podcasts, and we're very fortunate to have you here.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm doing is buying you coffee after the show.
That's right.
But no, we appreciate you being here.
Well, you're a good
really
friend.
do.
Kevin has always been a good friend of mine.
Thank you.
And,
So are you.
We go back a long way, and anything. I actually feel honored to be on the show, and again, Captain, to see you again and spend time with you. It's from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you guys too, and especially what you do, because you get an opportunity to highlight the positive too.
Thank you. So on that note, anything else, Cap?
No, but I think this was a great interview.
How long did we do? Almost an hour?
So before we do this, I'm going to wrap it up this way.
Okay.
Folks, if you like what you hear, first of all, I'd like to thank my guest, Keith Schiller, for being here today. Really appreciate it. One of our best guests we've had so far. And I believe it's going to be possibly, this may be a 100th show. So congratulations to all of us.
Thank you for having me. Yeah,
We're here
I
for the
think
100th show.
It's a great milestone, but also a tribute to both you that you've been around for 100 shows.
Thank you, Keith.
It's a good sign that you're doing something right.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, our guest today, retired NYPD detective, the best title. I know you had many titles, Chief of Staff for the White House, et cetera,
Right.
but the best title, retired NYPD detective, Keith Schiller. Folks, if you like what you hear, you could subscribe to Cop Talk, and you could also follow us on X at Cop Talk WABC. That's at Cop Talk WABC. Captain.
And YouTube. Kevin always leaves that out, leaves it to me to say.
Well, now it's your line. But until next time, God bless you, God bless America, God bless our military throughout the world, and also God bless law enforcement throughout the world. Thank you.
Hello, folks. Larry Kudlow here. Pay attention, because China is leading the largest anti-American alliance since World War II. One that's already dumped U.S. bonds, grabbed 43 million acres of our farmland, and is plotting to dethrone the dollar. That's why IRA and 401k savers are protecting their savings with gold. Please go to freegoldguide.com/Kudlow or just call 800-621-3908 for your free gold guide on how to protect your wealth with gold 100% tax-free.